Welcome back, guys. It's Marlon Echeverry here at the Natural Social Science Multimedia Lab here at Kendall Campus, Miami-Dade. Today we're going to be looking at what is known as covalent compounds. Covalent compounds are elements that like to share electrons when they're in a compound. Previously we discussed ionic compounds, which like to donate and accept electrons. This is the other case where they're fulfilling the octet rule, but they're fulfilling it by sharing electrons. This is the other scenario. So basic definition of a covalent compound: it's a chemical compound in which two nonmetals are held together by what is known as a covalent bond. And you have to remember that in a covalent bond there's the sharing of electrons. That's the key word. Now why don't we look at the periodic table and we'll take a look at a few examples. Anything to the right of the bold staircase are the nonmetals. If you have two of them, then that's an instance where you're going to have a covalent compound. So for example, if you have nitrogen combining with oxygen, or if you have something like carbon combining with oxygen. Anytime you have two nonmetals that are combining to form a compound, that's where you're going to see what we call a covalent bond, where they're going to share electrons. The idea is that you have your first nonmetal, and then you'll have your second nonmetal side by side. And what's going to happen between them is that they're going to go ahead and start sharing electrons. And then these will come back to the other element. So they are sharing electrons. Why don't we take a look at a few typical examples of what type of compounds are covalent. So a few. Here we have CO2, carbon dioxide. Carbon is a nonmetal, oxygen is a nonmetal, so sure enough, this is most definitely a covalent compound. One carbon and one oxygen combined together produces carbon monoxide. This is definitely a covalent compound. They're both nonmetals and they're both sharing electrons. So that's another typical example. C1H4, this is known as methane gas, and this is a covalent compound because you have carbon, which is a nonmetal, and you also have hydrogen. Now let's take a look at the periodic table because hydrogen does cause some confusion sometimes for a lot of students. If we look at the periodic table and we were to take a look at hydrogen here, we would see that hydrogen is all the way over here on the left side. So a lot of students like to say, well, isn't this area metals? And that is true. But you have to remember that hydrogen is an exception. It's only here because it's the first element. You have to remember that hydrogen is a nonmetal. It's a gas typically. So hydrogen is a nonmetal. Don't be confused by that. In the next video, we're going to be taking a closer look at some of these elements, and we're going to be starting to understand what their charges are when they're in covalent compounds. I hope this is helpful, and thank you.